Thank you. When Nasser got a hold of me and asked if I wanted to come and talk, I agreed, and he offered to have me speak on something that is near and dear to me. And so over the last few years, we've been on a bit of a journey of discovery inside of the company and looking at how we behave within our market space and how we work with and work against sometimes our competitors. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about how we evolved through that process and how we got there. If I could find the right button. Here we go. Before I get there, I would like to share a little bit about who we are and what we do. AIS is actually a family of 3 companies. The core AIS is our research and development division. We've actually started up and formed in Rome, New York, out of the Air Force Research Laboratory. We focus on research and development with cybersecurity tools for the DoD and the intelligence community. And we also have the distinction of working with several of the agencies as what they refer to as the voice of the offense. Sometimes they need somebody to come in and play bad guy for them. In the last year, we acquired RTGX, headquarters out of Maryland, New York, and they primarily focus on on-site services, working with customer teams, running network and security operations centers. We have about 20 people in the largest security operations center that DISA runs out in Scott Air Force Base, sorry about that. And they also participate in cyber exercise planning. On the commercial side of things, also in the last year, we made an investment into Great Castle Security, and some of the folks here in the audience are very familiar with them, out of Troy, New York. And they're primarily focused on the non-DoD, non-Air Force side of things, working risk assessment, incident response, and vulnerability assessments. And last year, we had the distinction of, for our first time, going over $100 million worth of business in a year. And everything keeps going according to plan. We should actually execute between 115 and 120 million this year. These are our 5 business sectors that we focus on within the business. And the evolution of the company is very focused on diversifying ourselves across the portfolio. And as you can see, we're doing very well. Last quarter, we hired 21 new employees. We currently have 80 positions open within AIS, 28 positions within RTGX, and Great Castle has 11 positions available. So I want to tell a little story, do a little experience share. In 2013, you may have heard about this little thing called sequestration. And the government decided to quite abruptly slash 10% out of their funding within the DoD. And they waited till about midway through the fiscal year for the government. And up until that point, the Pentagon, the president, our customers all said, don't worry about that, sequestration is never gonna happen. And so everybody spent and everybody acted and everybody prepared as though this event was not gonna happen. And unfortunately, on March 1st, 2013, it did happen. And what abruptly happened is the government had spent so much money, there really wasn't much left to pull that 10% back. And as a result, as a DoD contractor, we actually spent the next 12 months without getting a single contract from our customer. And that was deeply, deeply painful. In that process, we lost 40 employees. And thankfully, we came out of it as a stronger company. But when we came out of this, we realized that maybe we need to look at how we diversified against those 5 core areas that I talked about earlier. And we wanted to make sure that we could survive if something like this were ever to happen again. And we kind of came to this conclusion that either we need to accept that we as a company are going to be acquired into a business that has a diversification, or that we were going to go forth and we were going to be the acquirer. And after a lot of thought, we decided that we wanted to be the acquirers. So in 2014, we began looking at businesses that we wanted to acquire to fill those business sectors for us, to round us out. And one of the things that I became concerned about is, how do I preserve the core values within the company through the acquisition process? You bring in 15 people from a small company or 60 people from another company, and how do you still maintain who you are through this process? And so I began the process with my team of looking at discovering what those core values were. And in the process, we found what Patrick Lincioni refers to as accidental values. And in that, I discovered that we weren't particularly good at how we treated our competitors. And we weren't particularly good about how we interacted with our community. And this was inadvertently being pushed forward by myself and others within it, because that is how people within the community behave. And so within the cybersecurity domain in the government community, it is a highly, highly competitive market. We are 20 to 30,000 people short. And as a result, we tend not to behave well with each other. And so I set out on a mission to try to add an aspirational value to the company that said that this is not the way that we want to be. This is not who we want to be. We're going to do things differently. And there's several reasons why we wanted to do that. One, it's simply for we didn't want to be those type of people. But we also realized that we were perpetuating the same kind of behavior to other new companies that were starting up, and that we were locking them out of coming into our ecosystem, and that we felt that there was a value to building that ecosystem. In fact, one of the things I like that Martin just mentioned earlier in the last discussion was that when you bring a person into the region to work for you, they want to know whether or not they're going to be able to have a job if this doesn't work out for them. And so by building that ecosystem, we can help market the region that there are other opportunities there waiting for them. And so I want to do a couple of shares. When AIS was first started, within the first 12 months of AIS being in existence, I had no more than 3 businesses approach me to tell me how they were going to put me out of business. The first one was my former employer that tried to sue me out of existence because they didn't want me competing with them. The second came in and told me how they were going to outbid me, they were going to wipe me out, they were going to take business away because they were bigger and better and they can do it. And the third, and if you're familiar with Rome, New York much, and it's in history, this is in classic mafia fashion. I was invited to an Italian restaurant where one of the employees of the company had a meeting with me and actually sit me down and say, "How dare you start up in our town? We own this place." And unfortunately, that was my first introduction to how to behave within the market space. And fast forward a few years later, and I am probably about 20, 30 people, and one of my key employees leaves, and being passionate about my business, I'm very upset, and I'm ready to kick the guy out the door because he's leaving to go join a startup. And what do? I do the exact same thing that had been done to me. I have my little mafia meeting in a coffee shop, and I tell them how I'm going to put them out of business. And with a great deal of regret, that is how I was perpetuating this bad behavior. And so in 2014, realizing what a mistake I had made, I went out on an apology tour. I went to the businesses that I had inadvertently destroyed relationships with, and I went to ex-employees who I had destroyed relationships with, and I sat them down and I apologized to them. And what I learned out of this was some very valuable lessons. One is that if you treat them with respect, they will treat you with respect. And that if we work together, we can grow. And out of those apology tours, several employees actually came back to work for me. And some of the businesses that we had had a rough relationship are actually now some of our best relationships going forward. And so now it is a mission of mine to make sure that as we go and grow as a company and as we contribute to the ecosystem in the region in which we're operating in, is that we are welcoming to new competitors coming into the marketplace and joining with them and helping them in the very essence of, rising tide lifts all ships. But also making sure that even when another competitor is out there and that they may be bad-mouthing us or doing whatever it is they need to do, that they feel they need to do to grow their business, that we don't behave in the same fashion. Set ourselves above the other folks. And then I have personally been meeting and talking to other entrepreneurs in our region and telling them my story and encouraging them to also behave in the same way. And of course, it's an evolution, and so sometimes the employees don't quite get it. But I do give them a couple of proverbs to think about. Glad you guys like those. If you wait by the river long enough, the bodies of your enemies will float by. And the way I interpret that and the way I express that to employees is that if these people are truly bad actors, they'll do themselves in, and we don't need to expend any energy on it whatsoever. And the other, before embarking on a journey of revenge, first dig 2 graves. And that basically leads to the same essence, is that if we are going to behave in the same way, we'll destroy ourselves in the same way that they'll destroy theirs. And so that's my share.